On this episode of Business of Booze, we're focusing on cognac. It may surprise you, but cognac is extremely popular here in Singapore and across Asia. It was once the king of spirits before whiskey took over. So who drinks cognac these days? And can cognac evolve for changing tastes? I'm your host, Shashank Bengali, and I can't wait to find out more. My first stop was a history lesson from Mathieu Musnier, general manager of the Whiskey Connoisseur. Cognac, it seems, goes way back.
I think one essential thing that people don't realize is the history of cognac and how long it spans. And cognac really started in the 12th century, around the town of La Rochelle in France, where the first vineyard was planted. British and Scandinavian merchants used to trade salt between France and their country, and they started to trade wine. Shortly after, they realized that by distilling the wine would be more stable for travel. In the 17th century, double distillation started, and this is really the birth of the cognac as we know it today. When today we drink cognac, we don't drink a spirit which has 50 or 100 years of history. It's the result of 800 years of history and of natural evolution between trading of countries and trading of people and passion for people.
A large part of the global appetite for cognac actually comes from here in Singapore, which comes in just behind the United States in import volume. I spoke with Aaron Yang, Group Brand Manager with Pernod Ricard, about the state of the market and the challenges of marketing cognac in this region. So, Aaron, paint us a picture of what the market looks like today for cognac, both here in Singapore and globally.
Globally, from what I understand, it's about 18 million 9-liter cases, roughly. And a lot of those come from three big continents. So you got China, you got the States, and you got Africa. Singapore is a small reflection of that, I believe. So we do about 55 to 60,000 9-liter cases a year. 80+% of that largely Martell with the other players.
And how has that changed in the last 10, 20 years? Are the numbers going up? Are they about flat for cognac?
Cognac is interesting. It's very pegged to the economy. Over the last 10 years, it has been consistently climbing. I'd say it's also because of societal evolution, like people get more affluent. And this is always aspirational. So people always imagine like it is an expensive drink, but more people can afford it now. It's just that sometimes they don't realize how affordable it is until they venture into buying it themselves.
But even with the spending power, will the younger generation be interested to try it? Cognac, it seems, has an image problem. What are some of the perceptions that you feel are out there in the market about who drinks cognac, what the average cognac drinker is like? Tell us what you think the image is and if that matches up with what you see as the reality of the cognac drinker.
Cognac doesn't have the most, the youngest image or the trendiest image. A lot of Singaporeans think that cognac is drunk by abings or old businessmen, but the reality of it is that this is the people's choice drink. I mean, it's the number one brand spirit in Singapore. My marketing strategy is really to rejuvenize this whole category for cognac, to make it a lot more palatable for the younger and wider audience.
The rich history of cognac is something that appeals to aficionados of other drinks, like whiskey. Yet, there still seems to be some barrier to acceptance. Yuhan, our expert from the episode on whiskey, told me that the problem lies in variety. What to you are some of the barriers why people don't initially think of cognac as a drink? It's not as popular in the market as whiskey. Why do you think that is?
When people think of cognac and they go out there to the shops or maybe to the bars, the first thought that comes to their head is usually sort of the big brands, sort of the Martells, the Hennessy's. And it's really hard to find sort of boutique or connoisseur type cognacs. In fact, can't really think of a pure cognac bar.
If drinkers aren't that interested, can the bars turn things around? Michael and Celia from the Barbary Coast believe that cocktails could be one of the ways to entice a younger audience to pay attention.
Cognac has been an underappreciated spirit category for a long time. It's sort of skewed itself towards the slightly older demographic, slightly more established, and that's for the long time kept it out of the eyes of the younger generation who have really been driving the second coming of the cocktail renaissance. They're still not able to bridge the gap to one of the most romantic spirit categories, which is cognac. So for us, it's something, especially industry professionals, that we've always loved. It's just always been a difficult sell to the people who are driving majority of our business.
Are cocktails the trend in that direction to get people introduced to it and try it out and see how their palate goes with it and how they like it?
I would say yes.
I would say no.
Well, let's
great.
hear both sides. I'd love to hear both.
That's great.
So yes, why? Because it's kind of an easy way in?
It is. It's an easy way in to a very daunting spirit category. It's easy to get someone to try something that they're a little bit more cautious of in a familiar setting in terms of flavors, and then saying, oh, would you like to try it on its own? I would love to hear why you disagree.
I think that cocktails are a great way to get a person drinking a lower tier, sort of entry level cognac. But if you really want people to understand the category, you have to get them to understand the romance, the history, all of the blood, sweat, and tears that go into actually producing a good cognac.
Celia is also an experienced bartender and showed me how a classic cognac cocktail might end up refreshing Cognac's brand.
So I'm going to make you a sidecar to start, but I'm going to make you a sidecar royale. So it's actually a sidecar topped with a little bit of champagne. It just gives it that extra effervescence, a little almost woodiness that accentuates the vanilla and the fruit notes in the cognac itself.
So what goes into a sidecar?
It's cognac, which is the main body. So it's got 60 ml of cognac, it's got a little bit of lemon juice, and then it's got a curacao.
So can a cocktail like this, a classic cocktail, help bring people back to cognac if they know more about what they're drinking and what the cognac is?
Cocktails are a very easy and interesting way to get introduced to a category, especially one like cognac, that can be incredibly daunting and has all of that history and prestige around it.
Who orders a drink like this? I mean, you could see this being drunk by really almost anybody, young, old. It's so refreshing and yet really interesting and sophisticated too.
It is a classic cocktail, so a lot of people that have had it before feel comfortable ordering it again, or they will have their friend recommend it for them. But it's also a great cocktail for a bartender to have in their repertoire. As you said, it's a very easy sell for any demographic, for any palate.
Cognac operates by strict rules and produces a consistency that appeals to current cognac fans. But to get to a larger market, will cognac be willing to change? What do you think the future could be for cognac? Is it maybe more cocktails? Is it more innovation with the methods of making it? But is it a way of getting people interested beyond the spirit itself?
A bit more transparency will be beneficial for cognac. Today, people are really aware of roughly what VSOP and what XO means. There's a lot more to know about cognac to understand the different terroirs. And maybe the producer also to put that more forward, to be a bit more transparent about what terroir goes into the bottle. In terms of innovation, I think there are some practices in cognac, like the fact that there is no age statement above XO. The reality of cognac today is we have access to something which we don't have in whiskey anymore, is eau de vie of 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old. Or very rarely you will know the producer will actually put the age. And that's because as a practice, cognac doesn't put vintages on the bottle like Armagnac does.
And there is this gorgeous romance, many generations of history there that just don't get translated enough to the consumer. And in a day and age where we're always looking for something authentic, we're looking for things that are quote unquote bespoke, there's nothing that has the history and the story and the beauty of the production and the families involved that cognac and also agave that have. And it's a shame that we're not talking more about that. Really, their strength is in their history, it's in their prestige, it's all of the things that make cognac what it is. But how do we get people to drink that? Well, we need to spend more time on educating them. If you have a single malt whiskey drinker, the very first time they sit at a bar, very first single malt whiskey, they can look at the bottle for 1 minute and then order this whiskey. They can look at their date or their friend and say, I only drink Highland single malts, 18-year-olds in sherry cask finish. You can get all of that information quite readily on the bottle right there. It's part of the marketing, but cognac is so much more cryptic. You can't really look at the bottle and get the same kind of understanding as quickly. You have to dive in deep. You have to do your research. You have to do your homework. You have to really get to know the product before you can talk from authority.
Personally, I think innovation could be an interesting area. Now I know my fellow Frenchmen are very attached to tradition and how the things are made, so I don't believe cognac will soon allow people to age cognac in different type of barrels or like we have in whiskey happening. I don't think that's going to happen, even though I think that would be interesting.
If variety matters more now, it seems like the brands are listening and taking some steps toward what might once have been considered blasphemous.
It's a product that we haven't launched yet, but it's making like really big waves in the States. It's called Martell Blue Swift. it's a cognac, but it's aged in bourbon barrels. And because of that, due to the AOC, the Authority of Control in France, you cannot call that a cognac because it's not aged in French oak barrels. So that has really taken off in the States, I believe, because of the styling of the product, the marketing aspect, which is a lot younger and focused around hip hop and gastronomy, and also because it is aged in bourbon casks, and that gives a new flavor profile. So, without taking away from the core aspect of cognac, which is consistency, we kind of added a dash of variety, to kind of capture the audience again.
Is that what it's going to take, you think, in the next 5 to 10 years as you look ahead to the future of cognac? Will it take innovations like that to keep growing in market share, or do you think the focus on consistency, on that kind of aspirational aspect will keep the numbers rising, keep the interest up?
I'm on the fence about this, to be honest, because one school of thought, the sustainability issue of this is very real. I mean, environment changing, etc. So making a consistent product is going to be even more difficult. Then there are the other consumers who are just more fickle about it. So maybe the slightly younger consumers who just want to expand their repertoire and just try new stuff. So based off that, how many different types of cognacs can you try? Now thinking about it a bit more, I'd say consistency would still be highly valued, like moving forward.
So it would appear that cognac is at a crossroads in this era. To appeal to a wider market, it may have to loosen up a little and create more varieties, even change their process. But the most important part may still be in educating the drinkers and creating an environment to enjoy cognac.
We're drinking whiskey, rum, and now cognac a little bit more wanting to learn about the spirit.
At some point in life, we start drinking less, but drinking better.
Exactly.
And there is a place for good cognac in that stage. People that genuinely are curious. I think that's the only thing they have in common. We have almost nowadays as many male and female, as many people in their 20s or in their 60s. It's impossible to find a common trait rather than curiosity. I think people understand that in every category, beyond the big brands that Singapore has been offered for the past 10 or 20 years, now for the past 5 years, they see a lot more offering arriving in the market, and they're just curious. So what is this thing about gin? What is this thing about whiskey? What is this thing about cognac? And they come to these classes to understand, to fill up that void in their knowledge, because people like to know, and social situation, people like to have the answers, that not knowing is not a good thing. Everybody understands, everybody's on a different level, a different time in their discovery, in the journey of discovery. They're just here to have a good time and learn something at the same time.